Samuel's gaze lingered on his mother, his eyes brimming with profound sorrow. The last 3 months had been an exhausting battle against her illness, an adversary that seemed to be gaining the upper hand. The disease would have been defeated long ago if only they had the resources to afford the necessary medications. His mother Julie turned to him with an unyielding spirit, her voice trembling slightly as she said, "Hey, sweetheart, don't let your heart weigh heavy. I assure you, I'll soon rise from this sick bed and find a way to get us through this." "Mom," Samuel protested, his voice filled with worry, "I won't allow you to go out begging again. There must be another way." Julie smiled with an innate strength despite her circumstances. "Now, don't worry too much, son. It's springtime, remember? Folks are out in their gardens. They might appreciate a bit of help. Just like we did last year, remember?" she asked with a spark of optimism dancing in her eyes, even as her body battled against its own discomfort. The memory was etched clear in Sam's mind. Last spring, they had not only worked for the older folks in their block, but also managed to cultivate a small garden in their own backyard. Their neighbors hadn't just compensated them for their labor, but also generously shared some seeds. Sam had thrown himself into this project wholeheartedly, tilling a small patch of earth, planting the seeds with painstaking care, and watering them regularly. Their toil bore fruits as they were able to harvest their own carrots, tomatoes, cucumbers, and even some potatoes. The cucumber plants were especially rewarding, bearing a summer-long supply of crunchy, refreshing bounty that could be enjoyed straight from the vine. Julie was a stranger to these parts, her life a tapestry woven with experiences that seemed foreign to her current circumstances. She could scarcely have envisaged the twists and turns her life would take, landing her in such straits. A mere decade earlier, she had been a carefree young woman, untouched by the hardships that now weighed on her daily. Raised in a traditional family, she was guided by conservative values where her parents held the final say on matters of matrimony. She was expected to accept their wisdom and abide by their choice of partner for her. As such, she patiently awaited their decision, trusting that they would choose the right man for her. Her world shifted on its axis the day Adam graced her life. His presence brought a seismic shift in Julie's perceptions, rendering everything she'd known before as bland and colorless. Adam was a wanderer at heart, journeying from place to place, yet he found himself lingering longer at Julie's family home, magnetized by an unfolding clandestine affair with Julie. Their relationship was a secret symphony, with its melodious notes resonating only for the two young hearts entangled in its rhythm. Never in her wildest dreams had Julie imagined she could fall so irrevocably in love, abandoning caution and disregarding potential consequences. Adam had stoked a passionate flame in her heart that blazed brightly, consuming all thoughts of prudence. Love, it seemed, had the power to eclipse even the most deeply ingrained familial obligations. As time slipped by, Julie's clandestine affair was exposed to the harsh light of day. Upon discovering her secret relationship, her parents reacted with stringent reproach, punishing her for an act they viewed as rebellious and unacceptable. In their household, dissenting actions that did not align with their beliefs were often met with physical punishments, and this transgression was considered to be one of the highest order. Adam was relentlessly pursued by local youth, incensed by the audacity of an outsider transgressing their societal norms. The beatings he endured were severe, a stark contrast to the initial friendly demeanor of the community. He was taken aback by the violent shift in their attitudes, shocked that a seemingly welcoming community could allow such a brutal reprisal. In the deep silence of the night, when the world was lost in slumber, Julie stealthily ventured out into the moonless darkness. She had but one ally in these desperate circumstances, her elderly grandmother Sharon, who resided not too far from Julie's home. Sharon led a solitary existence, intentionally distanced from her children, with her own trove of reasons that she kept to herself. Despite this self-imposed isolation, Julie and Sharon shared a special bond. Julie frequently visited her grandmother, and they would often while away hours immersed in heart-to-heart conversations. Sharon would regale Julie with stories from her own youth, delicately passing on her wisdom to her granddaughter through these shared moments. This particular night found Julie seeking Sharon's aid to locate Adam. Sharon, having a trained dog, was ideally equipped for this task. With a sniff of Adam's backpack serving as the scent trail, Sharon's dog promptly embarked on its mission to find the missing young man. Adam was found in the woods, sprawled on the forest floor, a grimace of pain etched on his face. His leg had been severely injured in the attack, rendering him nearly immobile. He had been brutally assaulted by the local boys and then abandoned in the wilderness. Thanks to Sharon's skilled canine and their relentless search, Julie and her grandmother managed to locate him. They helped him back to Sharon's abode, where they could nurse him back to health undetected. For the ensuing days, Sharon tended to Adam with clandestine care during daylight hours, while Julie would visit him under the cover of night, ensuring their activities remained unnoticed by their slumbering community. A week of secret convalescence passed before Julie and Adam made the grave decision to flee their restrictive community. In a poignant farewell, Julie expressed her heartfelt gratitude to her grandmother for her unwavering support, not just through the recent tumultuous days, but for her guidance ever since Julie was a young girl. Before the young woman embarked on her journey, Sharon imparted one final piece of wisdom. "Julie, my dear, I understand that you're embarking on this journey in pursuit of your happiness. But remember, true happiness comes from accepting whatever blessings and challenges God bestows upon you, be they good or bad, and nurturing a heart filled with gratitude." Touched by her grandmother's words, Julie offered a final radiant smile and embraced her tightly, carrying these wise words close to her heart as she stepped into an uncertain future. Caught in the whirlwind of their sudden departure, Julie had failed to gather her identification documents. If it hadn't been for the modest funds that Adam had managed to save, their journey would likely have been cut short. The pair were wary of hitchhiking after dark, conscious of the risks involved and the fear of being pursued and searched by their community. However, Julie, with her resourceful mind, conceived an alternative plan. Having successfully navigated their way out of town, they settled on a new strategy. Julie, garbed convincingly as an elderly woman, would attempt to flag down the sparse semi-trucks that passed by their secluded location, while Adam remained concealed in the shrubs lining the roadside. Their initial attempts were met with disheartening results, as the first few trucks breezed by without so much as slowing down. One driver who did pause regarded Julie with a suspicious gaze, and she realized her ruse was unlikely to persuade him to offer them a ride. As the early dawn painted hues of pink and orange in the sky, Julie was standing by the roadside, desolation creeping into her heart. Suddenly, she spotted an aged pickup truck chugging slowly over a nearby incline. Throwing caution to the wind, she stuck her thumb out, signaling for a ride. The truck, moving at a leisurely pace of about 35 miles per hour, gradually pulled over to the roadside. An elderly man, rifle slung across his shoulder, exited the vehicle and sauntered over to the front of his truck. He studied Julie's appearance with a thoughtful gaze, his experienced eyes discerning that the young woman before him was likely embroiled in some form of trouble. Julie's disguise as an old woman seemed to have fallen short for this observant man. With a friendly nod, he greeted her. "Howdy, young lady. Where might you be headed at this early hour?" With this gentle greeting, Julie sensed a flicker of hope. The old man's demeanor instilled in her the courage to lay bare the truth. "Sir," she started, her voice quivering slightly, "I'm not alone. My boyfriend is with me. We're running away from my parents." "Adam," she called out softly. "Honey, it's safe. Come out." The old man's gaze fell upon the emerging Adam, sweeping over the young couple in a contemplative silence before he let out a deep sigh. With a resigned shrug, he turned back towards his truck. As he reached the driver's door and pulled it open, he addressed Adam, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Put your bag in the back." Throughout the journey that followed, the elderly man remained taciturn, his gaze fixed determinedly on the road ahead, as if he had chosen to detach himself from the pair in his vehicle. His face bore a stern expression, a clear indication that he wished to remain aloof from their predicament. After several hitchhiked rides, Adam and Julie eventually arrived at Adam's family home. He had assured Julie that his parents were kind-hearted people who would embrace her into their home with open arms. However, upon the arrival of Adam's parents, it became painfully clear that Julie's presence was not met with the warm welcome that had been promised. The ensuing dinner was perhaps one of the most uncomfortably quiet meals in the family's history. The clinking sound of forks against plates echoed ominously in the strained silence, each note amplifying Julie's feeling of discomfort. Every time she attempted to break the ice, to alleviate the palpable tension, she would be interrupted by Adam's mother with a request to pass the pepper or the napkin. thereby curtailing her efforts. After the silent ordeal of dinner, Adam led Julie to the guest room where she would be sleeping. She settled down on the edge of the bed, her heart pounding in her chest as she considered the distress her parents must be experiencing in her absence. As she sat there, lost in her whirlwind of thoughts, she could hear the muffled but distinct sounds of a heated argument emanating from the other end of the house. Adam's parents were chastising him, their words laced with disapproval and disbelief. They expressed their outright rejection of Julie, stating that her presence was an embarrassment to their family. "Are you out of your mind, Adam?" Their voices echoed through the otherwise silent house. "Why did you bring her here? Look at her. She doesn't belong here. I don't know how you're going to convey this to her, but we are in no way endorsing her presence." Their ultimatum was crystal clear and unyielding. Adam had to sever ties with Julie. What stunned Julie the most was Adam's silence. He passively absorbed his parents' onslaught of criticisms and objections without uttering a single word in defense or protest. Eventually, he responded, uttering a sentence that felt to Julie like a cold, harsh wind blowing through her heart, chilling her to the core. "Yes, Mom, I got it." His acquiescence to his parents' demands left Julie feeling abandoned and isolated, as if she were now completely alone in this vast world. Julie struggled to process what she had heard. Her heart tightened painfully in her chest, and a wave of desolation washed over her. It felt as though the walls were closing in around her. The pressure was suffocating. Her innocent dreams of forging a loving family and living a simple, beautiful life shattered into countless fragments in mere seconds. Anxiety started to grip her as she dreaded what Adam was going to relate to her. She feared she wouldn't be able to endure hearing his words, the final blow to her already shattered spirit. Swiftly, she packed her few belongings into her small bag, fleeing from the scene of her heartbreak and stepping out into the cool embrace of the night. From that moment forward, Julie was thrust into a harsh reality. She scraped by, taking on temporary jobs where she could, and receiving paltry sums for her efforts. Her situation was further complicated by the lack of any identification papers. Even her attempts to secure a position as a waitress in the restaurant were futile due to her lack of experience. The manager, however, suggested she could take up a job washing dishes. In her quest for shelter, Julie found herself amidst a group of homeless individuals. Despite their own circumstances, they proved to be exceptionally kind and guided her through the challenging lifestyle they all shared. She often sought refuge in homeless shelters, but when these facilities were at full capacity or too distant, she found herself sharing the rough streets with her newfound companions, huddled against the elements under the open sky. One day, while she was tackling a stack of dishes in the kitchen of the restaurant, a wave of nausea swept over her. Pam, the sous chef, noticed her discomfort and cast her an understanding glance. Initially, Julie didn't suspect anything until Pam supplied her with a couple of pregnancy tests. To her astonishment, the results confirmed that she was indeed pregnant. When Samuel came into the world, his birthplace was not a sterile maternity ward, but a modest shack. Seeing Julie's predicament, her friends from the streets pulled together their meager resources and managed to rent an apartment for her and the baby. While it was far from an ideal living space, it was a significant improvement from the cold outdoors or the overcrowded shelters. As time passed, Julie came to a disconcerting realization. She was gradually becoming resigned to her precarious lifestyle. While she could endure such circumstances for herself, she recognized that her son Samuel deserved a better life and a sound education. Acknowledging the harsh reality that she would be unable to provide these essentials on her own, she found herself left with a heartbreaking choice. She would have to surrender Samuel to an orphanage. The thought of giving up her son to an institution was beyond any agony Julie could imagine. She knew that the separation would tear her apart, but it was the only avenue through which Samuel could gain identification papers and the opportunity to attend school. She acknowledged her limitations as a mother and how little she could offer her son. The most heart-wrenching part of her decision, however, was the necessity to explain it to Samuel. He was an astute boy, capable of reading, writing, and counting. His level of understanding was mature beyond his years. Julie acknowledged that her current predicament was the result of her own choices. Her health was in decline. She was experiencing nervous issues, weakened legs, and a general sense of ill health. She had to summon all her courage to communicate the forthcoming changes to Samuel and ultimately take him to the orphanage. As much as she desired to postpone this inevitable reality, she knew it had to be done eventually. Once Samuel was under the care of the orphanage, nothing else mattered. Her primary concern was ensuring he was safe and provided for. With a heavy heart, Samuel stepped out of their modest apartment. Despite his tender age, he was burdened with a weighty concern. His mother's birthday was approaching, and he wished to give her a resplendent feast, a moment of true satiety amidst their days of scarcity. Lost in thought, Samuel meandered aimlessly. Then an idea came to him. He would pay a visit to Mrs. White, a kindly neighbor who often lent a helping hand to their struggling family. Mrs. White had a son, Michael, who was about 3-4 years older than Samuel. All of Michael's outgrown clothes were handed down to Samuel, and Mrs. White regularly brought food for them during her visits. Samuel halted before her house, deep in thought. They had already received so much assistance from this kind-hearted woman, and he was hesitant about asking for more. It didn't feel right to impose further on her generosity. With a sigh, Samuel continued his stroll, daydreaming of a miraculous find, a windfall of cash on the ground, sufficient to cover his mother's medicine and their meals. He was well aware that such fortunate incidents belonged exclusively to fairy tales, but his heart yearned for that bit of magic. Caught in this fanciful reverie, Samuel hadn't noticed that he was standing before a restaurant until his daydreams were interrupted by a chorus of laughter, screams, and joyous cheers. He halted in his tracks, trying to decipher the source of the noise. What he saw was a crowd of elegantly dressed people, all seemingly celebrating a wedding. He had never before witnessed such a concentration of beautifully dressed individuals in one place. Drawn in by the spectacle, Samuel moved closer, utterly captivated by the sight of the bride and groom walking towards the stunning decorated wedding arch. The bride seemed hardly more than a girl, her youthful beauty reminiscent of a porcelain doll. Samuel thought he recognized her likeness from somewhere, but he couldn't quite place it. The groom, by contrast, was a handsome figure, elegantly attired, but noticeably older, likely over 30. Yet, in spite of the celebratory atmosphere, the groom's demeanor lacked the radiant happiness that lit up the bride's face. Something about his expression seemed aloof, detached from the joy of the occasion. A deep voice suddenly disrupted Samuel's trance, causing him to instinctively shrink back, ready to flee. But the voice belonged to a young man whose eyes sparkled with mirth and goodwill, if somewhat glazed from drink. "Alright, kiddo. Stay put, okay?" the man slurred. "My best friend's getting hitched today, so I reckon I'll fetch you some sweets." With a slightly unsteady gait, he ambled off, leaving Samuel standing uncertainly by the sidelines. He saw the inebriated man engaging in a conversation with the groom, who seemed to be desperately trying to make himself understood. The man, however, appeared more interested in the celebrations than whatever the groom was trying to convey. Samuel assumed the man had likely forgotten about him, and turned his attention back to the wedding ceremony unfolding before him, a spectacle of grandeur and happiness he had never before witnessed. His mind took him to a fantasy world where he could see his mother dressed in a flowing white gown, her hair styled elegantly, and a radiant smile lighting up her face. He imagined her walking down an aisle strewn with flower petals under the soft glow of fairy lights, surrounded by well-wishers. The thought of his mother, so beautiful and happy, brought a smile to his face, but it quickly faded as he was snapped back to reality. A twinge of sadness washed over him as he realized the harsh contrast between his dream and their current life. The man suddenly leaned down towards Sam, a familiar scent of strong spirits wafting from him. With an extended arm, he presented a crumpled brown paper bag to Sam, its insides brimming with an assortment of vibrantly colored candies. "Thank you so much, sir." Sam's eyes sparkled as he eagerly accepted the sweet treat. "No problem, kiddo," the man replied, a sloppy grin spreading across his face. "Now, watch this. The bride is about to toss her bouquet, and between you and me, I'm hoping no one catches it." Sam's eyes widened in curiosity as he turned to look at the man. "What happens if you catch it?" "Well," the man chuckled, flicking imaginary dust off his formal attire, "they say that whoever catches it will be the next to walk down the aisle. And trust me, one of my buddies out there," he pointed to a group of men laughing and joking among themselves, "will be the hapless victim." Sam's grin widened as he nodded in understanding, his eyes reflecting amusement. The throng of well-dressed attendees began to form a wide circle, leaving a handful of young women standing at the center, with Sam unwittingly caught among them. His eyes were wide, glancing about in confusion and intrigue as he wondered why he found himself in this odd situation. Then, out of nowhere, a flurry of petals came fluttering down towards him. Instinctively, he threw his hands up, defensively bracing himself against the incoming object. To his surprise, his fingers closed around the bouquet of soft, fragrant flowers, the stems tied neatly together with a silver satin ribbon. As the crowd erupted into excited cheers, he looked down, astonished. He was holding the gorgeous bride's bouquet, which had just been flung into the air as part of the wedding tradition. Caught by surprise, he was now the focus of everyone's attention, holding the bouquet aloft like a prized trophy. Caught up in the unexpected flurry of excitement and attention, Sam didn't stick around. He clutched the bouquet tightly and made a beeline for the exit, his heart pounding in his chest. His legs moved as fast as they could carry him, propelling him through the streets under the soft glow of the city lights. With the bouquet in one hand and the bag of sweets in the other, he was practically sprinting all the way home. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, almost in rhythm with his rapid footsteps against the concrete. The cold wind whipped against his face, but he didn't notice. All he could think about was the look of surprise and joy he hoped to see on his mother's face. His breath hitched in his throat at the thought of finally being able to gift his mother something special, something beautiful. He could already see her surprise, her eyes lighting up as she took in the sight of the fragrant bouquet and the sweets he had managed to acquire. He felt lighter than air, almost as if he was flying, buoyed by the joyous anticipation of his mother's happiness. As he darted through the city streets, Sam was so consumed with the joy of his recent finds that he was oblivious to the fact that the groom and the inebriated man were hot on his heels. Their loud calls and hurried footsteps echoed through the quiet, narrow alleyways, but the sounds barely registered in Sam's mind. The groom, still in his suit, was running with a stern expression, determination etched onto his face. His friend, despite the influence of alcohol, was trying his best to keep up with him, stumbling over the uneven pavement. With his hands held out, presenting the sweets and the bouquet, Sam beamed at his mother with an innocent pride that tugged at Julie's heartstrings. The pure joy in his eyes, coupled with the sweetness of his efforts, brought tears to her eyes. Her emotions welled up, spilling over in a cascade of salty drops that slid down her cheeks. She reached out to pull Sam into a tight hug, holding him close as sobs racked her body. She stroked his hair gently, marveling at the beautiful soul her little boy had, how he had managed to bring a sliver of happiness into their difficult lives. "And this," Sam said, holding out the stunning bouquet, "I caught it. The bride tossed it in the air and I caught it." The innocence in his voice, the pure delight that shone from his eyes as he shared his little adventure, was enough to make Julie's heart constrict. "Oh, Sam," she whispered, tears falling faster now. Her son, her sweet, caring, innocent son, was the best thing that had ever happened to her. He was a beacon of hope in her otherwise dreary existence. But soon she would have to give him up to secure a better future for him, to offer him the life he deserved, and that thought broke her heart even more. The modest dwelling stood frail and time-worn, a stark contrast to the merriment and opulence of the wedding they'd just left. The sparse furnishings and the threadbare fabrics hinted at a life of struggles and sacrifices. "I thought you were trying to hurt him." "Oh my God, Tony, are you out of your mind?" "I'm sorry, Adam. With your wedding and everything, I thought you were mad at him." "Quiet. It sounds like it's somebody's birthday in there. Let's see what's going on." They could hear the soft strains of a happy birthday song, filled with warmth but tinged with a sadness that resonated within the confines of the small dwelling. The door had been left ajar. A dim light spilled out into the dusk, casting long shadows in the small yard. The two men exchanged a glance, uncertainty flickering in their eyes before they tiptoed towards the open door, curiosity piquing their interest. As they stood at the threshold, they looked in, their eyes falling on the scene within. What they saw was a picture of stark reality, a struggling family living on the bare minimum, a young mother with a loving son, celebrating a birthday with the little they had. A stark contrast to the world they were accustomed to. The room they had entered was not extravagantly furnished. A sparsity of items marked it as the home of a family facing hardship. Nonetheless, there was a sense of order and tidiness that spoke volumes about its occupant's character. When the groom took a step forward, his eyes fell upon the woman lying in bed, with the young boy sitting at her side. An immediate sense of regret washed over Tony. "I'm sorry, ma'am." He quickly apologized. He caught Sam's eye, the young boy who had effortlessly caught the bride's bouquet earlier. Recognizing the faces of the groom and the man who had given him sweets, Sam sprang to his feet. He instinctively positioned himself between his mother and the intruders, his back stiffened in defiance. "Why are you here? Did you come for the flowers?" Sam inquired, his tone both defensive and slightly fearful. "No, buddy, we're not here for the bouquet," Tony replied gently, trying to ease the boy's concern. His gaze drifted towards Adam, then back at Sam. "We were just thinking maybe you guys could use some help," he added, his voice imbued with sincerity. Julie nudged Sam slightly, turning to examine the guests in the room. Her eyes roved over familiar faces and paused on Adam for a beat longer than she had planned. She found herself locking gazes with him. Adam's eyes bore an expression of subtle puzzlement. Adam scrutinized Julie's face, a nagging sense of familiarity creeping into his consciousness. Yet he couldn't quite pin down where or when he might have crossed paths with this intriguing woman. Julie, on the other hand, was caught in a torrent of memories, as if she had been thrust into a tornado of thoughts. Visions of her past surged back with startling clarity: the rebellious episode of her teenage years, the hasty retreat from the safe cocoon of her parents' house, and the naive conviction she held for a man whom she believed would move heaven and earth for her. With a deep breath, she brushed past the echoes of her past and straightened her posture. She finally broke the silence that had stretched between them, her voice carrying a certain resolve. "Hello, Adam." Tony stood aghast, his brows furrowing as he tried to make sense of the unexpected development unfolding in front of him. He glanced from Adam to Julie, then blurted out, "Do you two know each other?" Adam, struck by disbelief, turned his attention to Sam, who had been standing in quiet observation. He scrutinized the young man's features. The resemblance to himself was undeniable. A realization, slow and shocking, began to crystallize in his mind. "Hi, Julie. He stammered, lost for words, and stood dumbfounded, grappling with the sudden revelation. "Is Sam—" Adam started, but Julie intercepted his question, her voice firm yet laced with a strange calmness. "Yes." Tony was left floundering in his confusion, his mind spinning as he tried to piece together the cryptic puzzle. "Now, can someone explain what the heck is going on here?" he demanded, his eyes darting between his friends. Adam sighed, shaking off his stupor to address Tony. "Tony, this is Julie, the girl I told you about from that hiking trip. You remember?" Tony's face contorted in an effort to recall. They'd embarked on countless adventures and hiking trips together, making it a challenge to isolate one particular incident from his memory. "Do you remember when I was beaten up on a trip?" Adam prodded Tony, hoping to jog his memory. A look of realization dawned on Tony's face. "Oh yeah, I do remember that," he acknowledged. By this point, Julie's eyes had welled up with unshed tears, brimming with the emotional turmoil within her. Observing this, Sam immediately stepped forward, protective and resolute. "That's enough. Please leave. You're upsetting my mother. She can't afford to cry right now. She's unwell," he declared. The sudden shift in the man's behavior had caught Sam off guard, but regardless of who they were, his priority was shielding his mother. Meanwhile, Adam's phone buzzed in his pocket. Seeing the caller ID, he excused himself to answer. It was his bride. "Honey, I'm heading back. Yeah, I'm not too far away." "No, don't worry, it's nothing major. We'll be there shortly." Adam concluded the call and turned back to Tony, an apologetic look on his face. "Tony, we have to go." As he glanced back at Julie and Sam, he caught sight of a tiny smile breaking through Julie's tear-streaked face. "I'm really sorry." Adam voiced his apology, then pivoted to leave. He halted mid-step when he noticed Tony was still rooted to the spot. "Tony, come on, let's go." Tony just stood there, a scowl distorting his face. He was unable to reconcile the sight of his friend preparing to walk away from the tense scene so casually. "Adam, are you seriously just walking away? Just like that? What the heck is wrong with you, man? Look at the kid." "That's not on me, Tony. You don't know the whole story. You can't pass judgment like that," Adam retorted. "Man, I don't need to say anything. The situation speaks for itself." "What do you expect me to do?" Adam asked, frustration creeping into his voice. "Anything, Adam. Anything but this. Not just walking away like it's nothing." "But I can, Tony. Let's just leave." "Well, screw you, Adam. I'm not going anywhere with you," Tony snapped. "Fine. Suit yourself." With that, Adam stormed out, letting the door slam shut behind him. As soon as the door clanked shut, Tony sprang to action. He dashed out the door, yelling at Adam to stop. He caught up to him, and without uttering another word, he swung a right hook that connected with Adam's face. "Now you can go," Tony spat out, then turned around to head back inside. Despite the chilly rain falling outside, warmth and merriment filled the Walkers' household. The family had congregated around the dining table, celebrating Samuel's first wrestling medal, earned at a district tournament. A tantalizing aroma of Grandma Sharon's scrumptious turkey, paired with mashed potatoes and a medley of vegetables, filled the room. Julie was a whirlwind in the kitchen, arranging plates and filling glasses with brisk efficiency. Breaking the joyful chatter, Sam turned to his grandmother. "Grandma, where's Dad?" Sharon patted Sam's hand reassuringly. "He'll be here soon, darling. Probably held up at work." Just minutes later, the doorbell chimed, heralding Tony's arrival. He sauntered in, lugging a bag brimming with gear for Sam. "Here you go, big man. I got you some new gear," Tony declared, presenting the bag to Sam. "Thanks, Dad," Sam responded. He shot Tony a small grin before turning away and shaking his head lightly. It wasn't as though he needed anything. He had everything he could possibly want. But Tony, whom he affectionately referred to as Dad, never missed an opportunity to shower him with gifts. The family gathered around the dinner table, the air filled with a soothing hum of chit-chat and laughter. Tony had been haunted by the events of the fateful wedding day, unable to shake off the feeling that it was morally wrong to abandon someone who had saved your life, and more importantly, your own flesh and blood. Consequently, he resolved to care for Julie and her son Samuel, not out of sense of obligation or guilt, not because he harbored feelings for Julie, but because he was moved by Sam's unwavering dedication to his mother's well-being. Growing up, Tony had only ever known his father, never having met his mother. Watching Sam's display of care and protection for his mother had a profound effect on Tony, melting his heart. The family was nestled around the table, engaged in merry conversation and laughter, when an unexpected knock on the door punctuated the festive atmosphere. The room fell into silence, curiosity etched on every face. They hadn't been anticipating any additional guests. Taking initiative, Sam stood up. "I'll get it," he announced, padding over to the door. When he swung it open, the cool and fresh aroma of the post-rain evening was overpowered by the sharp scent of alcohol. Standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame for support, was Adam. He was drenched, the rain having soaked through his clothes, and he was panting heavily. Adam looked down at Sam, and overcome by emotion, he broke down. His words tumbled out between sobs. "I'm so sorry, son. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Can you forgive me?" Sam had forgiven his biological father long ago. Adam had married the woman his parents deemed suitable for him, but genuine love for her eluded him. He had been spiraling for several months, alcohol becoming his crutch. Today, under the influence and emboldened by liquid courage, he had ventured to seek forgiveness from the people who could have once been his family. Sam peered up at Adam, his young eyes filled with a sense of pride. He reached out and took Adam's hand, guiding him towards the dining room. Upon seeing a bedraggled and tear-streaked Adam, the rest of the family fell silent. "Mom, do you think we could set one more plate?" Sam asked, casting a glance at Adam. "Sure. Let me get it," Julie replied, rising from her chair. For the next few minutes, an awkward silence hung over the room. However, it wasn't long before Sam's engaging questions livened up the atmosphere, and the familiar sounds of laughter and cheerful conversation filled the air once again. Feeling a sense of acceptance wash over him, Adam finally believed he had been forgiven. From that day forward, the oppressive weight of guilt that had been bearing down on him lifted, allowing him to walk away, finally finding peace within himself.